Good morning, and thank you for joining us for the museum's Facebook Live series. I'm your host, historian Edna Friedberg. During each program, we discuss a different aspect of Holocaust history and its relevance in our world today. These terrible events demonstrate again and again that very often ordinary individuals could play an important, even life-saving role during the Holocaust. For many of us, the month of December is a season of holidays, and with that comes revisiting traditional family recipes. Today's program is about the power of food to connect us to our past, and particularly about one person who during the Holocaust not only saved one family's recipes, but also helped to preserve childhood memories and faith in the goodness of our fellow human beings. I am so pleased to be joined by two friends today, Steven Fenves, a Holocaust survivor and one of our cherished volunteers at the Holocaust Museum, and Alon Shaya, a James Beard award-winning chef and restaurant owner. Welcome to the program, Steven, and hi there, Alon.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, May.
Hello, Steven. Hello, Edna. Thank you.
Steven, I wish we could be together in person. You are just a short drive from me. Alon is down in New Orleans, so we hope to all gather in the same room at some point. During the program, please post your questions for Steven and Alon in the comment section, and we'll get to as many of them live as we are able to. But Steven, let's begin with you. I want to set the scene for the world that we are revisiting. You were born and spent your early childhood in a town right on the border of the countries of Yugoslavia and Hungary. Could you please tell us a little bit about your family and give us a sense of what everyday life was like before the Holocaust for a Jewish family in your region?
Subotica, at the very top tip in the middle, became part of Yugoslavia after World War I. It was a town of about 100,000 population, Hungarians, Serbs, and Croats, and among them about 6,000 Jews. I had a very pleasant upper middle class upbringing. My parents were professional people. My father was first manager of a printing plant. Here they are visiting a neighboring farm. He eventually became editor-in-chief of the newspaper that the plant published. My mother was a graphic artist. By the time we were born, was doing largely commercial work, much less fine art work. The family was not particularly religious. My parents attended services in the synagogue for the high holidays and the festivals. My sister, who was 2 years older than I, we attended a religious school 3 times a week. Here we are just before the occupation. My sister wears the uniform of 2nd grade of academic high school, which is 6th grade. Our family we had a reasonably sized household, a maid, a chauffeur, a governess who spoke, who lived with us, and a cook. The only odd thing about my childhood is that I was trilingual at a very early age, and so was everybody else in town. The saying goes around the town is that even the dogs in the town bark in multiple languages.
When you say the different languages, what were the different languages that you spoke and in what setting? What'd you do for fun?
Serbian and Croatian are so similar. Now the two states separate them, but Serbo-Croatian was one language, Hungarian, and we spoke German with our governess.
What kinds of things did you and your sister Esti do with your friends to relax in your free time?
Our movies were a big thing, mostly American movies, very badly dubbed in. You had sort of had to guess what was going on the screen. Ice skating in the winter. There was a very nice lake 6 kilometers away, and with two beaches. We went there quite often. Birthday parties were a big thing, and then travel. We often went to Budapest as a family. Both my parents had relatives in Budapest. So it was a very busy life.
And I think one that sounds very familiar to many of us. I'm thinking about my own childhood, my kids, also, like to go swimming, hang out with their friends, go on a trip to see their aunt. So it sounds like a really pleasant and comfortable time. And I'm struck here looking at this beautiful photo of your family. I see a good resemblance between you and your dad, Steven, which I don't think I've noticed before.
Yeah.
So, I want to acknowledge viewers that we have watching from all around the country and all around the world. Good morning to you, and thank you for joining us from Raleigh, North Carolina, Boynton Beach, Florida, Fresno, California, Douglasville, Georgia. I think that's a new place for us. Hi, Douglasville. Omaha, Nebraska, Columbus, Ohio, and from New Orleans, where Alon is joining us from today. We'd also like to greet and welcome our international viewers tuning in from Mexico, Berlin, Sao Paulo in Brazil, Vancouver, Canada, Tel Aviv, Israel, and Cotignac in France. We're so glad to have you. So you were describing that you had a very comfortable upbringing, Steven, that included quite a bit of household help of staff. But I'd like to focus in on one person in particular, your longtime family cook. Who was this woman, and what can you tell us about her?
I apologize. I no longer remember Marish's last name because she was never addressed by that. I have no idea when she started working for my parents. I know exactly the day she was let go when we were forced to let all the staff go. She was a big, strong woman, commanding great respect from everybody, maid, seasonal helpers, vendors at the market, and certainly from my sister and I. She had a thick Hungarian pronunciation, and that was a language of its own. Coming into to Washington, I realized that there is such a thing as Irish stew, two words. In my childhood, that was a single word pronounced as Irish Jew. So she did a lot. She was a very vocal person.
From how you've described her, it sounds like she was certainly master of her domain, and you had a lot of respect for her and deference.
Yes.
We have an audience question for you, Steven. A viewer named Nils Skudra is wondering if there was strong anti-Semitism in your community when you were growing up before the war.
Not officially. I know that my father had editorials about it, but it was nothing like 8 miles north in Hungary, where anti-Semitic laws were started in 1920, long before anybody in Germany had the idea of introducing those laws.
It wasn't something that you experienced in your daily life?
Not until 1941, when the occupation started.
So let's turn to that, because I know that life changed very abruptly for you and your family on April 6th, 1941. For context for our audience, Germany invaded Yugoslavia, and Germany's ally, Hungary, occupied the region that the Fenves family lived in. Could you please tell us what happened that day and over the next 3 years? Well, over the next 3 years, what happened?
That day, on that very day, an armed Hungarian officer with sidearm drawn expelled my father from his office. The plant was confiscated, and an Aryan administrator was put in charge. All of the staff of the family had to go, because Jews were not allowed to have servants, and also we had no funds for them. Half of the apartment was taken away, housing Hungarian officers, so sort of off-camp housing for Hungarian officers. We lived on what of our possessions we could sell, including my treasured stamp collection, and by the craft work that my mother could produce and organize a whole bunch of her friends in producing. For 3 years, they were increasingly severe restrictions, humiliations, etc. Entrance to schools, academic schools, was highly restricted by law, and I had to work very hard to be admitted to be one of the 9 Jews out of a class of 45 to be admitted, and suffered almost 4 years of neglect and humiliation in school. Every month, Jews were required to line up at the police station, either reporting something or giving up something. We kids eventually worked out a raffle to try to guess what was going to be requisitioned the following month.
And when you say requisitioned, you mean that the government would demand that you turn over household items or private property.
Right.
So it's a lot.
But for 6,000 Jews, there was only one clerk in line, so you can imagine how long you stood in line in open targets for the contempt, including spits from the passerbys who went by. So
it's really year after year of grinding, humiliation, attacks, physical and economic insecurity. I know this is really painful history to remember, and we appreciate you sharing it in order to educate our audience. But I'd like to then bring in Chef Alon, because against this backdrop, more than 75 years later, in sort of unexpected, truth is stranger than fiction kinds of ways, a new relationship emerged. Alon, how did you come to meet Steven and learn about the Fenves family and their history?
So a couple of years ago, I came to visit the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and I visited the archives there and found that there were many recipes that were rescued from the concentration camps and also donated to the museum from different families. Many years ago, about a decade ago, I was in Israel and was on a culinary tour and able to see recipes that were written on the back of bomb receipts, that were written on the back of scrap paper, pieces of cloth that were all written in the camps. And I was so moved by that. I really was wondering what food meant to people during that horrific time, and how food played a role in people's survival or people's mental state, how they survived mentally and also physically. And so when I was telling a friend in New Orleans about this experience and how I wanted to learn more about these recipes, she recommended that we go and see what the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. would have. And lo and behold, they had a whole plethora of recipes that were rescued from the war. After looking through many of them and really not being able to read any of them because they were all in Hungarian or Polish or Russian, I came across this cookbook, the Fenves family cookbook, and was informed that Steven Fenves, who donated the book to the museum, lived close by and regularly volunteered at the museum. And I was that really hit me as an opportunity to reach out to Steven and get firsthand knowledge of his memories and his experiences with food. And through this book, maybe if I was really lucky, be able to cook a few of these recipes and taste the food. And so Steven and I began talking, and he has now been translating the recipes for me. And I've been cooking the food at my house and kind of working through deciphering the recipes, because a lot of them are just a list of some ingredients. There aren't many directions on technique or oven temperature. And so I've been working through the recipes and sending Steven the food to taste, and he's been sending me back his critiques, and I've been making adjustments. So it's been an amazing friendship and journey that we've been on over the last year on developing these recipes out.
A really, really special joint venture. And Steven, as you know, most survivors, very few, would have items like a family recipe book or even photos from their lives before the war. I'd like to talk about the circumstances that led to this book surviving and to your regaining ownership of it, of this handwritten heirloom. I know it's difficult, but could you please tell us about the day that you were forced out of your childhood home into a ghetto?
Well, in May 1944, Germany occupied Hungary because there were rumors that they were seeking to get out of the war. And with the German soldiers came Eichmann, the executor of the final solution. And in a matter of 6 weeks, he deported, I think, nearly 600,000 Jews to Auschwitz. How did he do that with only 600 soldiers? Very simple. The soldiers did nothing. The Hungarian state police had a rehearsed, worked out plan. All they needed is approval, and they were let loose, and they handled it. On the particular day of the deportation, my father had already been taken away. I have no idea how the populace was notified about the forthcoming deportations. All I know is that by the time we started going down the stairs from the second floor with the little bundles that we were allowed to take, every step on the stair was occupied by a person standing there waiting to ransack the apartment, yelling at us, spitting at us, cursing us as we went down. So that was the setting. What was unbeknownst to us then is that our former cook was in that crowd and competing with the vandals who vandalized the apartment. She collected family belongings, and she returned it to us when we came back.
And although the circumstances, of course, of your removal from your home and your neighbors coming in to loot it are specific to your situation and unique, many Jews during the war suddenly found themselves feeling like the rug was pulled out from under them in terms of social ties, that they were betrayed, that people who they thought were their neighbors, their friends, their coworkers, in fact, would celebrate what was happening to them, take advantage of their vulnerability, and in fact, join in anger and hatred. And here we see from your town Jews leaving with just what they could carry in their hands, leaving most possessions, most of their household behind, and people would move into their homes, take over their belongings. And
I can't identify the place, but again, I want to point out that the soldier with the rifle there is not a German soldier, but one of the local collaborators with the Germans.
Yeah, and that is such an important point, that the crimes of the Holocaust, the scale, as you so correctly said, would not have been possible without the collaboration of hundreds of thousands of locals. The Germans could not do it by themselves. We have a comment, more than a question, from the audience that I want to read to you, Steven. A viewer named Rondi writes, "I am glad that you are here to tell your story. I think what upsets me most about these histories is the people who had previously been civil to you, or maybe even friendly, turning on you. so much cruelty and cowardice. And indeed, it's
That
been nice.
hurt my mother more than anything else.
So you mentioned that Marish, your family's longtime cook, though, was there in the crowd, that you didn't see her. And that is what is really unique, in that she came in. What did Marish do, and how did you find out that she had gathered for safekeeping some of your family treasures?
To set the stage, I was liberated in Buchenwald, returned to Subotica in June of 1945. A few weeks later, my sister, who was liberated in Bergen-Belsen, returned. And then, to everybody's enormous surprise, my father returned on a Soviet military hospital train on a stretcher, totally broken physically and emotionally. He could never accept the fact that he lost his wife, and he died 4 months later. Shortly after my father's arrival came another enormous surprise. Marish, our former cook, showed up, and as I said, unbeknownst to us, she was there with the looters. She went to the kitchen, picked up my mother's recipe book. She went to my parents' bedroom and picked up a diary of our early childhood from there. And then she went in her former studio, which by then was a playroom for my sister and I, and took out a big paper folder and stuffed in it pell-mell everything that she could reach: lithographs, etchings, schoolwork, a self-portrait, and others that you see behind me, whatever she could lay her hands on. My sister at age 6 months, and family portraits. The vast majority of it was schoolwork. My wall is full with, I think, 15 lithographs and etchings that she did. So that was a great surprise. 2 years later, with our father dead, we decided to escape Yugoslavia, and we consigned to Marish the artwork, the diary, the recipe book. After we got settled, she located one of the settees from our apartment, and that we couldn't take with us, so we donated that to the local museum. And so that's she held on to it until the early 60s, until she was finally allowed to ship it to us when my sister was living in Chicago.
And I believe we have a photograph of you and your sister Esty sitting on that settee on a sofa that Marish rescued. But what is really so touching, it clearly, excuse me, demonstrates the intimacy that Marish had with your family, working in your household so closely with your mother for so many years, that she recognized what would be most precious, not in monetary value. Here you are on the sofa that she rescued, the love seat, but that the handwritten recipe book, the artwork from your mother's hand. It's hard for me to imagine the emotion that you must have felt upon seeing this.
This settee that you see is also my mother's work. It was designed by her uncle, a very well-known architect, but it was hand-stitched by, the cover was hand-stitched by my mother and my grandmother. You can still see it prominently displayed in the Subotica City Museum.
Incredible. I've talked to you many times, and I never knew that your mother actually designed and created this. She was clearly a very, very talented artist.
At the bottom of the picture, you can see the boots that Esty was given by the British in Bergen-Belsen a year and a half after we came home. That was still the only pair of shoes she had.
Wow. Wow, so many layers to a seemingly straightforward photograph. But let's turn to the recipe book. Alon, the museum digitized this recipe book because it is very, very fragile. And that also made it clearer, able to handle it, so to speak, without it falling apart, but also for Steven to translate and make accessible to you the table of contents and 13 of his family recipes. What did you learn from the information that Steven translated for you? What doors did it open?
Well, I kind of got a glimpse into the Fenves life before the war and what life was like around the kitchen table, around the food. Through my conversations with Steven, I learned all kinds of stories of him going to the market with Marish and with his mother and aunt and loading up on all the seasonal vegetables and fruits that were at the market. And I thought that it was really beautiful, the memories that he shared of bringing all that home and everyone working in the kitchen to pickle and preserve and can those things. But I also learned more about Marish, who is really such a hero. And I learned about what type of kitchen she ran. She was a very, very much of it sounds like a very strict cook. And there were some of the recipes, such as the potato circles, which Steven told me about that I made, and how him and his sister weren't really even allowed to eat these. These were made for guests that were coming to the home that his parents were entertaining and reserved for special events. Steven told me about one of his favorite recipes as a kid, this roasted turkey, in which the turkey meat was pulled off the bone and ground up and then packed back onto the turkey bones and then baked. And Steven recalled kind of getting through all of that ground turkey meat to the meat that was sticking to the bones, and how that was him and his sister's favorite part of the turkey. I learned about, even though food was so important to the Fenves family that they had this big cookbook, it was really amazing to me to learn that it was one of the few things that Marish saved when she had a chance to enter the apartment. And it reminded me how important food plays, what an important role it plays in people's lives. And through learning the recipes and talking with Steven about them, it was really nice to get a glimpse into the positive family moments that were so plentiful and so special prior to the occupation.
And Alon, you have really been living with these recipes for many months now, creating them, iterating them. Steven, how have you told him when he's gotten things wrong, if he's gotten them right?
Well, we haven't tasted today's fare yet, but certainly what we have tasted before were really terrific. The ground turkey was great. The sticks, semolina sticks, which was a very frequent side dish, and the preserve that came in the previous package were all very authentic. And
Steven said, make sure that the semolina sticks look like fish sticks. So as I was preparing the semolina sticks, I kept thinking in my head, like, make sure they look like fish sticks. And here's a picture of them. I think they do, and it really is essentially a cream of wheat. It's semolina wheat cooked down with milk and chilled, and then cut up and lightly breaded and fried, and they're delicious. I love them, and it's one of our favorite little snacks around the house now. Thanks to Steven and the Fenves cookbook.
And Alon, you've been so generous. You've prepared these foods in New Orleans, packed them in dry ice, sent them to Steven, even to me, as a totally unexpected bonus for us to heat up or fry and taste here in the Washington area. So let's get to a recipe today. Steven's family recipe book contains more than 140 recipes, but together you selected a walnut cream cake for today's program. Can you please tell us why you picked this recipe and how you prepared it and show it to us? And I know, Steven, you're going to be tasting this cake for the first time in, 75 years or more. There it is. So gorgeous.
So yeah, this cake was one of the ones that Steven had picked out as part of his memories of all of the sweets that would adorn the tables, and how he said he had such a sweet tooth growing up, and he remembers all these desserts. And when he sent me this recipe, I was really blown away. I was like, 5 cups of walnuts. Wow, that is a lot of walnuts. And then as I researched more, I realized how much walnuts are used in Hungarian cooking, and how they played a large role in the Fenves cookbook. So this moment here, where Steven will be tasting the cake for the first time in 75 years, and a recipe from his family book, is what is moments that I live for. I've waited my entire career for these types of moments where through the food that I cook, I can share memories and I can share experiences and learn more about people and bring happiness to people.
So Steven, go ahead. Let's dig in. I know this cake also, it's more than just something very delicious, but because it's made with nuts rather than flour, it was suitable for the Jewish holiday of Passover, where you can't use grain in cooking. To a modern sensibility, it's gluten-free. And I'm going to taste it too. Tell us a little of the technique of how you made it.
So part of the process was grinding the walnuts through a meat grinder. And I remember my grandmother, who's Bulgarian, always had a little meat grinder clamped to the side of our counter, and she would not only grind meat but also grind nuts for a lot of the things that she made. So it was a very common way to chop the walnuts into very fine pieces prior to folding them into the cake, which allows the cake to really rise and have a lighter texture with the walnuts ground up really fine. So that was a technique from the book too that really resonated with my grandmother's cooking and reminded me of the food that I was eating when I was growing up from my grandmother.
So lovely. We have an audience question from Amy asking, as we light the 7th candle for Hanukkah tonight, what did your family eat to celebrate the holiday? And did you have any other special traditions for Hanukkah? And actually letting Steven finish chewing and tasting the cake, let's have a look, because it is traditional to make foods with oil for the Hanukkah holiday to celebrate the miracle of oil. And we have some video from a prior demonstration you did.
As I said before, my parents were not very religious. My paternal grandmother was. The weekly sholent, the bean dish for the Saturday noon meal, came from my grandmother. As far as I recall, most everything for Passover and almost everything for Hanukkah came from grandmother, not from Marish's kitchen.
So it was really a family thing.
Yeah.
Let's have a look. Let's have a look at this video. Some of the foods you were talking about earlier, the semolina sticks being fried up. Steven, what did it feel like when Alon brought to life, literally, these foods that you hadn't seen or tasted, the cake, the semolina sticks, the potato circles, in over 75 years? What did that mean to you?
The memorable things were the ones that exactly duplicated what I remembered, like the semolina sticks, and the ground turkey. The sweets, I'd probably remember them more closely because I must have had a very sweet tooth as a child. Eating this, I honestly, I cannot isolate the memory of this dish from memories of all the other sweet dishes, but certainly in terms of freshness, in terms of the lightness, the sweetness, the naturalness comes through. in a time, in a situation where there was no refrigeration, every new fruit of the season was celebrated with something. And I'm sure that at walnut harvesting time, there were a plethora of walnut dishes.
That's how 5 cups end up in one recipe. I'm sure they had a lot.
Hazelnuts was the same thing actually in the back of the apartment building. There was a row of hazelnut shrubs, and that was carefully guarded from us and collected for a hazelnut cake.
Yeah.
Thank you, Alon and Steven, for making it so visible and really transporting us to a place before it was shattered. We have a very different food type question for you, Steven. An audience member named Carl is asking, he writes, I heard when visiting Auschwitz that women would lay in the barracks, verbally creating or comparing recipes to pass the little free time they experienced and to fend off the horrors of their situation. Can you add anything to that? Carl is asking.
In Auschwitz, I was in what was called the youth barracks, the place where nobody came ever to select slave laborers. So you were there until you died from starvation. The universal pastime was getting together in groups and talking about foods that you had eaten, and particularly making up stories of the meals you were going to order when you got out of there. So that was a very, very vibrant memory of reminder of the food. Much later on, when our children were small, it was a convenient bedtime story to talk about food that my sister and I liked and disliked. Creamed spinach on the top of the second list. And the kids remember those talks.
Thank you for that question, Carl. We know that, as Steven has just remembered and you have described, that for many, many survivors, while they were in the camps, they could be stripped of all of their physical possessions. They could be stripped of their name and dignity and identity, but no one could strip them of what was in their heads and in their hearts. And that using memory to transport themselves to a time of plenty, to a time of comfort, to a time around their family table was a form of resistance and of spiritual sustenance. Alon, I'd like to, before we close, ask you a couple of last questions. A viewer named Sasha is asking, Chef, any plans to involve these recipes at Saba, which is your restaurant, sometime in the future?
Well, yeah, this entire experience of cooking through the Fenves cookbook has really not only inspired me, but so many of the cooks that I work with, our pastry chef at Safta in Denver, helped with testing the horseshoe tarts that we made, the poppy seed and walnut horseshoe tarts. And I think we're gonna, feature these on our menu at some point as a Fenves family recipe, and be able to tell a little bit more about the story to our guests that come to the restaurant. So we hope that the story of Marish continues to live on as the hero that saved this book and allowed these recipes to be enjoyed for future generations.
Well, Alon, you have certainly paid tribute to Marish, to her loyalty, to her bravery, and to the Fenves family. And I know you've brought a lot of happiness to Steven, his wife, Norma, their kids and grandkids during this process. So thank you.
And they've brought a lot of happiness to me. So thank you, Steven, to you and to your family for being so gracious and generous with sharing this. It has been a monumental experience for me and so emotional to get a glimpse into your life through food.
And I want to thank you, Alon, for your interest and persistence in reviving these recipes and reviving these memories. And you, as I said before, you have created a friendship at distance, but certainly my admiration for you is continuous.
Thank you.
As to our cook, Marish, I owe a great deal of gratitude to her, in addition to what we described about returning our artwork. Before that, during the occupation, she actually came to help out while she was working elsewhere. In the ghetto, she brought us food occasionally. After the war, she helped us find an apartment. She and her husband helped us find an apartment, and they saw a cart going by with the settee on the cart. They strong-armed the driver and took the settee away from them. So she continued her devotion and her service to our family, and I'll always remember that. Having these mementos have meant a lot. Every morning when I come to this room, the first thing I do is look at the row of the surviving artwork and thank Marish.
Steven, in closing, we have a couple of questions comment from an audience member named Kemba. First of all, she says, your mother's art is beautiful, and she put a heart next to it. She's asking, first, would you consider making a cookbook with your family recipes as a fundraiser for the museum? But in a broader way, she said, what message, Steven, can you share with us to ensure that we can teach our children to learn more empathy for each other?
The lesson to the children, let me answer that first. What you need to inculcate in your children as early as possible, in any language that is understandable to the children and not upsetting, that any form of injustice, discrimination, persecution has the potential of escalating into genocide and Holocaust when supported by the government. So you have to tell them that the milder message is Eli, what is else? Don't be a bystander. But today, the message has to be stronger. You have to be as active, as committed to preserving sanity and respect of human life as are those people who are against those things. That's what you have to transmit to the children.
Well, I want to thank you both so much for your generosity today. Steven, yours in sharing your memories, these silent witnesses of these artifacts with the world, and Chef Alon for your efforts to recreate these special foods that are so much more than food. I'm sure that all of us watching can really understand the power of the senses, of taste, of smell, of the sound of something sizzling in the pan, to transport us to another place and time and to help us understand the magnitude of what was lost. I hope our viewers can also imagine how this story is just one of millions of families destroyed by the war. So thank you both.
Thank you.
I also want to pay tribute to my colleagues. Without the work of conservators and translators, we would not have family recipes and important memories like Steven's to share. Many of you have asked how you can support the museum's efforts to preserve Holocaust history. And as we end the year, we ask that you consider supporting this work with a donation at ushmm.org/recipes. A secure link to make a donation will be provided by the museum in the comment section at the end of this show. I also want to invite you to please join us for our next program in the new year on Wednesday, January 13th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time in the United States for our next Facebook Live show titled Communities of Hate: Why People Join Extremist Movements. We'll talk with a social psychologist and a historian about what motivates people to join extremist groups and discuss how racism, conspiracy theories, and anti-Semitic myths inspire recruits, and can provide a sense of purpose and belonging in order to justify violent acts. This is our last scheduled Facebook Live of 2020, an extraordinary year it's been. On behalf of the whole production team behind the scenes who you don't see, we would like to wish you all a safe and healthy holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year. Be well, be safe and healthy. Bye-bye.